Welcome to the show. I'm JJ Flazanes, your host. Thank you for downloading today's episode. Today is the third interview with Dr. Cherie Carter-Scott. I've interviewed her now here on my show twice, and she interviewed me on her show. And so now all of that content is now published. The interview she did with me was released on January 2nd. We talked about what determines your value. And this show today, the Happiness Operating System, was one that I've been holding because I wanted to wait until her product and program was ready for you to purchase. And I've got a really awesome discount for you for that as well. Before we get to that, though, I just want to remind anyone out there that we've got two things going on right now. The Inner Circle membership, it's a $9.99 membership. You get one group coaching a month with me and everybody in the community, and you get 3 to 4 extra podcast episodes that actually don't appear here. They're separate. And we do things like our own 30-day manifestation challenge, which we're doing right now. Yesterday in the group, we started our 5-day fasting mimicking diet accountability group. So we're doing a lot of fun things within the Inner Circle membership. And again, that's $9.99. You can cancel at any time, and there's a 7-day free trial. We do have 3 slots left. It's 2 or 3 by the time, again, this airs. It's going to be 2 or 3 slots left in the Inner Circle Mastermind. And of course, that's much more than $9.99, but it is an investment into your business, growing a business, a podcast, writing a book, some goal that you may have to stretch yourself beyond what you're normally used to having this time of year. So it is a year-long program. I will close it at the end of January. There'll be 15 other people in the group, and it is literally a dedication to sharing business ideas, helping each other, sell each other's products and programs, developing our curriculums and our marketing. And if you don't have a business, there's actually a few people in the group that are cultivating ideas for what they're going to do next. This price will never be lower than it is right now. And for those of you that have a business or want to make sure you make your investment back, there is a guarantee that you will do that. But there's no pressure in case you don't want to do that, because you just want to give yourself time and space, as well as the incubation of all of the other people in the group, what's going on for them. You're going to learn so much. So there are 2 to 3 spaces left in the mastermind. Again, it will close at the end of January. Now on to the Happiness Operating System. Dr. Cherie has kindly offered me a discount to give to you if anyone's interested. So listen to the show. I believe there are 6 points or pillars within the Happiness Operating System, and we really only talk about 2, but the 2 we talk about, I know for most people, is enough. They alone can be a game changer. So I am using my show notes. For those of you that remember, I never used show notes. All that you ever saw in a show note was literally my bio or the other person's bio. Now what I'm doing is adding all the links. So guys, when you hear a special or an offer, please don't go to jjflazanes.com and search the site. What I'm giving you when I verbally tell this to you, because I know you're possibly driving and you can't write things down, I'm giving you a link to remember. So obviously jjflazanes.com / is what stays the same every time. So the only thing you need to remember is what's on the other side of the / So for this particular program, it's HOS, Happiness Operating System. And of course, you don't have to remember anything. Just open up the show notes or the see more information, and there will be a link directly to this program and a discount code. So I didn't want to record and stick it at the end of the episode, but if you're interested in the Happiness Operating System, it calls to you, she speaks to you, she speaks to me, I love her. You can use the code HAPPY300. Now, it came over to me in all caps, so try HAPPY300 and you will save $300 off the program, okay? So again, that's jjflazanes.com / HOS, Happiness Operating System, and use the discount code HAPPY, HAPPY, 300, and you'll get $300 off her program. Okay, and if you get it and love it, please write back to me and let me know. I'd love to hear some feedback and share it with her. Dr. Cherie Carter Scott is the CEO of MMS Institute, LLC, a boutique firm which specializes in custom design, personal development, and professional training programs conducted by her team of highly skilled coaches. She has worked with her clients in the areas of coaching, mentoring, and coaching supervision, and she is currently being trained by the ICF headquarters to be one of their 100 preeminent assessors worldwide. She is a subject matter expert in motivation, self-esteem, customer relations, change management, communication skills, team building, coaching, mentoring, customer service, change management, negaholics, overcoming negativity, and leadership training. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Cherie.
It's my pleasure to be here with you, JJ.
Yes, I would hope that you would love being with a super fan. I feel like I'm a super fan, that I've been talking about your work for so long. And I know that the last show we did, people heard me gushing about how you were probably the first person to bring me into a state of consciousness and a heightened awareness to where I was prior to that, and started that momentum going, which I love it. And I'm hoping to also contribute to the world in a similar way. And you've had such a great career, and it continues, of course. And something that you're working on right now that you're passionate about is called the Happiness Operating System. And when I heard that that's what you were launching and working on, of course, we had to talk about it. So why don't we go right into what is the Happiness Operating System?
So one of my clients was in our masterclass where we teach people how to lead our programs globally. And she was from Germany, and she said at one moment that she had this epiphany. And I said, what happened? She said, I just realized I'm operating with an out-of-date operating system. And I said, tell me more. She said, when I was a child, I was absolutely joyous, carefree, playful. I had the most wonderful childhood until I turned 6. I said, and then? She said, my father was in a car crash and suddenly died. And my mother had to scramble and figure out how to feed and take care of 6 children. She was completely unprepared. And that was a dramatic change in my life where everything moved into scarcity, fear, and trying to make ends meet. She said, that's the operating system that I grew up with. And I still have it today, but I've never replaced it with a new one. And I've been working at a very big national and multinational company and paid well and been very successful. But underneath it all, it's my old operating system. And what I want to do here today is to design and activate, launch my new operating system.
Had operating system been something that you taught in your training and coaching?
Actually, we hadn't used that phrase beyond computers. And so what happened is we started realizing that what Florence was saying made a whole lot of sense because all of us have to deal with computers in our lives every day. And to have a metaphor that's that clear about an upgrade. You need an upgrade. Oh yeah, of course I do. It's been 6 months. Give me an upgrade. We're used to that in our lives now. But when we first put together the coach training that I deliver, that was 45 years ago. 1974, we didn't have computers back then. That's something that's grown over time. So when Florence put the two together, her childhood, her old operating system, the new system, and she said, I need a new system, things clicked.
I love when I get clarity like that. And I don't know about you. I'm going to ask you this question. For me, I was recently with a friend who's a very successful business owner. She teaches women how to have successful businesses and leverage and scale. And we were talking about things. And she said she wanted to help me and look at things for me and give me ideas. And some of the ideas were great ideas right now. And some of them weren't. I felt into them and intuitively thought, this is something that's going to have to wait. Sounds like a good idea, but doesn't feel like the right time. Doesn't feel like the right energy or my next step. And what I realized after the fact, and I had been talking to her a little bit more, was that I don't even, at this point, I'm still not completely clear how to package everything I'm doing all of the time. Now, that's not true when we're talking about a specific, for me, I do many different areas. And and I have expertise in all of them. And I put them all together. I think that's sort of my hook, is that I put them all together and connect them. And so when she said, I want to look at your business plan, I said, well, I don't even know what I'm selling yet. Can we just hold off? Because I keep growing. I keep changing. In the last 2 years, I've been expanding at a really increased rate where I'm growing and I'm stepping into a new way of presenting myself in the world, of identifying myself, of speaking on topics. And so I can only imagine, because I was limited. I felt I limited myself for a long time in the fitness industry, which I knew I didn't really want to be defined as, but because I didn't have a degree as a therapist, or at that time a coaching certification, or really a degree in any other area, I thought, or even a degree in training, let's be honest, I thought, well, who am I to teach this? And it's taken 20 years to get to the point where now I can step into a confidence of knowing and trusting that my experience and my education is that of value, to name it and call it what I believe it to be now. So let's talk about your journey to getting to the happiness operating system. I mean, is this sort of the culmination of 45 years of work? Did every decade turn into a new version, a new upgrade, a new operating system for you?
Yes, as a matter of fact, you nailed it. That's what happened. It was an evolution just like you're going through right now. And I want to address the business plan because, over the years, people have said to us, where's your business plan? What's your marketing plan? What are you? And every time we have come up with a business plan that looks great for the bankers, something has happened to totally change reality. I'll give you an example. In 1998, we had a lovely business plan. We knew what the future looked like. I got a call from the Oprah Winfrey Show asking me to be on their show, and everything changed overnight. And the way the world is changing now, as fast as it's changing, almost on a daily basis, we can't have 5 and 10 year plans. The longest we can have is 3 to 6 months, if that. And so the old concept of get your business plan in place, make certain that it's really solid, it's going to last, and show it to your banker and your consultant, and then march into the future. It's an obsolete concept.
Well, thank you for that. I agree, because I thought, how in the world can I'm in the process of uncovering, of unfolding, of letting it all just come to this perfect timing that when I'm called to do it, it shows up, it appears. And again, each stage, I can say what I think I want to focus on, but looking back at I can only imagine, because you've been doing this twice as long as I have, I know my growth over the last 20 years. And so let's talk a little bit about your growth over the last 45 years.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey because each different juncture will kind of show up in an interesting way. Like my personal evolution will be my journey. And then I'll have clients that are mirroring back to me my journey through their journey. And all of a sudden things will start to crystallize. And it's the crystallization that will dawn on me like, oh, pay attention. This is the next chapter. This is what it looks like. And it also feels like very often I'm in graduate school again and again and again with that which I hadn't learned yet. A lesson will be repeated until learned. How many times do I need to repeat this lesson before I've sufficiently learned it? So the book, it's a book. It's a series of videotapes. It is the culmination of 45 years. And the premise is that each one of us is born perfect and happy. And that's our birthright. And there are things that come along the road of life. There are 6 potential barriers that actually challenge us to achieve our happiness, to reclaim that happiness, and to be able to overcome those barriers.
So how would you say the happiness operating system is different than if love is the game series?
Okay, so the game series of books are focused on, if life is a game, these are the rules, is focused on the overall philosophy of the rules for being human. That's the basis of that book. And I wrote that because somebody said to me one day, it's kind of challenging being human. It'd be really nice if we had some handrails to hold on to, guidelines, kind of a a set of rules that pertain to all humans. There are religions and doctrines, but they're niches. I mean, something that unites us in our humanity. Wouldn't that be cool? And so that's where the rules for being human really came from. And that's the basis of If Life is a Game. Now, If Love is a Game is based on a compatible relationship with a person with whom you want to partner in the adventure of life together. And that's where those rules came from.
Well, that's a flagship book for me. Like I told you before, I think it's within the first 10 episodes of the Fit to Love podcast when I launched, because I wanted to share that book with everyone who came in contact with my show so they would buy it and so they would use it because it was successful for me. I told you this before, I love your writing. It's very conversational. It's easy to read and it's impactful. And for a long time, and I didn't even go past chapter 2, to be honest. I just stayed with the list and I kept revising the list. And what I would do is I'd have the list and then I would manifest the list and then I'd change the list because I was like, oh, I don't want that. I thought I wanted that. That didn't really work. Let's change the list around. And it became a thing that I would literally keep a file for the list. So
so smart.
So we have the game series of books. And then at what point did you start your coaching? They started training other people to be coaches?
Well, right away, as soon as, my first client said to me, would you work with me on my business? And I was very honest and said, I don't know anything about business. And he said, that'll be great. That'll be so helpful. And I said, you really want to pay me to know nothing? And he said, absolutely. And I thought he was a little crazy, but I kind of was suspicious. You're like, why me? Why this? And he said, figure it out. Now, when I worked with him, it became clear that my not knowing what was best for him was the best thing for him in the whole world. In other words, he was running into people who were advising and suggesting and mentoring and trying to fix, help, solve. But what I did is I just asked questions from a really pure place, believing that he had his best answers, that I didn't have those answers for him, which is what he wanted, what he needed, and what really worked. So when I started coaching officially as a paid coach, October 15th, 1974, I had him as my first client, but then he just started talking, just like you, to people saying, this woman asks great questions. And then they started flocking to me, and I was a little overwhelmed. But at that time, I didn't realize that people were going to say to me, could you train me to do what you do? Could you teach me? So I had onesie twosies that I was working in a kind of beta testing capacity, having them see, are you willing to cross over the line to not knowing what's best for another? Are you willing to be humble? Are you willing to quiet the voices of your mind so that you can listen to the other person? Listen with your heart, listen with your spirit, listen with the insides of your hands, to be able to hear what they're saying, but what they're not saying. And that is when I started training coaches, was right in 1974, November, December, and it started going on until people started saying, let's analyze what you're doing. And then let's help you put it into a curriculum so that we can start to scale it.
So when was MMS Institute born?
October 15th, 1974.
Officially?
Officially.
Okay.
Yep.
Excellent. So now you have a certification, and has the certification evolved in the last 40 years?
Well, yeah. As a matter of fact, it was in 2013, after we'd had enough people come to us and say, gosh, I really want to take your coach training. MMS coach training has such a great reputation and brand out there. And then they'd say, are you ICF certified? And our answer was, well, no, but we've been around 21 years before ICF ever existed. And their response invariably was, my boss said, I have to take an ICF course. And if you're not ICF accredited, I can't take it. Well, this happened more than 3 times. And I said, that's enough. We're becoming ICF accredited, and we're going to eliminate this barrier to entry.
So the content of your training didn't change, but the structure had to become accredited?
Well, it changed to accommodate ICF, but see, we had 40 different core competencies at MMS when I started it, and people analyzed and put this curriculum together with me. When we discovered ICF, there was a lot of compatibility and parallels, but there were some things that were different. Like, for instance, it hadn't come up in my coaching experience to include ethical guidelines. And ICF brought that to the table, which I thought was really important given some of the stories I'd heard about unethical behavior. They also brought some other pieces like coaching presence, which I had always taken for granted. So ours were very specific behaviors that you could observe another person doing and that you could provide feedback for them what and when and how they did those behaviors. Whereas ICF was thin slicing their core competencies into 77 core competencies. So it was an interesting journey of seeing where we were identical, like active listening was in both. And then I had asking open-ended questions, they had asking powerful questions. So they were similar, but there wasn't anything that was a real knockout punch between the two. So in analyzing them and also presenting them to our students, these are our traditional core competencies from MMS, and this is what ICF offers. And you see the similarities and you see the subtle differences.
So is the happiness operating system, I heard you explain it came from one of your trainers, one of your coaches that realized that they needed to reboot or their operating system from the time they were 6. But is the program for the general public? Is it a way in which, okay, it's for the general public. And so let's talk about that.
It's for anybody who is struggling in life to reclaim their happiness. And that's where we really go over the 6 barriers that can be in the way of somebody really being a happy person.
Can we talk about any of them now?
Absolutely. The first one's emotional. And my premise is if you do not have emotional safety, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to be happy. And emotional safety is having the freedom and the permission to be able to say whatever you want or whatever you need to say without the fear of judgment or recrimination or attack, put downs, etc. And to have that emotional safety in your life is so fundamental for all of us. If you don't have it, it means that it's a real barrier.
Okay, here is the $1 million question about that. Are we helping people to create their own emotional safety, or are we needing others to help support that? And therefore we're sort of dependent on others to help provide that.
It's the former. It's create their own emotional safety and surround themselves with a support network that enables them to be their best selves. It goes back to if love is a game and when you were making your list every time. I suspect with the list that it probably changed from time to time because you didn't have that emotional safety in that potential partner.
In retrospect, I am sure that is part of it. I know that when I made my very first list at the time, I was a personal trainer at a gym in New York City. I was also simultaneously a musical theater actress. And I actually even did a little show off Broadway with a friend, a cabaret show. And I thought that the right thing to do was to have a relationship where we had similar interests. And so, of course, I manifested literally what was on my list. Ended up, I was dating a guy who secretly was gay and also had a lot of repressed anger about that because it came from a Catholic family from Long Island who his brother was a cop and they were very Catholic. And so he was mean because he was trying to repress all of the anger and that he had. And I didn't see any of this, by the way, because I thought you're a man who is a dancer and an actor and a trainer, and you live in New York City. If there's any place to be safe and gay, it's here. But no, that wasn't it at all. So after I realized that combination of things wasn't necessarily the right combination because and again, each person I recognize would be a different delivery of that. But I thought, nope, maybe this isn't the right thing to ask for. So then I would revise the list, or I would think something isn't as important. I would say, oh, it's like I didn't have in the knockout punch area that they had to be a cat lover. So, the first person I date that all of a sudden is allergic and can't stand cats, I'm like, oh,
That's
well,
hysterical.
this has to move on the list, right? So that is why over time, definitely it changed. And yes, thinking about a man who my father in my parents' relationship, still to this day, oohs and ahs over and over again when every time my mother cooks anything, even if it's leftovers. I used to make a joke that Dad, she could make a shoe and you would think it's amazing. And you go, this is so good. And it's super cute. And I never realized the impact it had on me until the first person I dated, when I cooked for him and he said it was okay. And I thought, oh, this is not what I'm used to. So I thought, okay, that needs to change. That's going on the list. I need something who appreciates my cooking more and a lot. And so yeah, through the years, I had fun, obviously, as you see, sort of analyzing what I learned from each relationship and how it made me grow and get more specific and clear about what I wanted and what worked and what didn't work for the person I was in that moment. So, so back to this emotional safety, the reason why I'm asking that, obviously on my show, I'm sure you have no idea all of the content that I do on my show, but talking about things like victim mentality and the victim triangle and work of Marshall Rosenberg and nonviolent communication and the idea of whether and I agree with on that we need emotional safety. It was sometimes people want to demand that from the people in their lives and often blame them when they don't feel safe. So I was just making sure, and I figured, because I know your work, that this is more of the empowering upon yourself to choose wisely, choose often, choose differently, and create a safety net for yourself without asking others to be different for you.
Exactly. And I know in my life, at least growing up and early adulthood, there was so much judgment, criticism, negativity. I mean, even I remember when I said to my father, he said, well, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm starting my own business. Well, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm helping people find their own answers to their own challenges. Oh, it'll never work. It'll never work. You have to tell people something different, something that they didn't know before they met you. And that's when they'll pay you, but you can't help them find their own answers. That's never going to work. That kind of criticism and judgment was part of my growing up. I mean, I didn't have an ooh-ah dad like you did, but I noticed that the judgments are, for me at least, they were a way of derailing. So if I had the desire, like, I want to learn to play the drums. Drums, they're noisy. The neighbors will react. No, you don't want to play the drums. No, you want to play the piano or a harmonica or maybe the violin, but you don't want to play the drums. So I found constantly that whatever it was that I was expressing that I wanted to explore or experiment with or venture out, the reaction by and large was, no, you don't. That's not going to work. You don't want that. And so I started to mistrust myself, my own knowingness, my own core of clarity and certainty. And that, to me, is one of the things that robs us of our happiness in life.
Agreed. There are a few of the authors and coaches that I have had major experiences with. You were first and continued. And there were a few others. Another one would be Harville Hendrix and imagotherapy. And Harville has recently also done safe conversations, which he took out of imagotherapy, and that grew and changed and got switched around and edited and went to a recent workshop, and they were even still changing it. But what I noticed is that they pulled out of their training something very specific called safe conversations. And it kind of reminds me of what you're talking about. It's different because we're talking about the individual creating what it is they need and assessing that versus having in safe conversations, literally a script that to create safety. So the idea of safety in emotional relationships with ourselves and others is more important than I think most people understand.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, that you remember I wrote a book called Negaholics?
Yes.
How to Overcome Negativity. Well, negativity seems to be our default system. In other words, we will venture out on trying something new, but the default, we haven't done it that way before. That's not part of our culture. That's alien. That's too strange. We don't do that. All those responses, whether it's in a work environment or in a personal environment, it's so much keeps one in the status quo rather than venturing out and exploring possibilities and new possibilities. So the Negaholic book that I wrote, again, then the corporate Negaholic, which was in the work environment, is really addressing, are you surrounded with people who tell you you can't, or are you surrounding yourself with people who believe in you and tell you you can? And that's a real fundamental question because, in the emotional area with this, what we're talking about, safety, we all have had broken hearts at one time or another. All of us have had some sort of disillusionment, betrayal. We've had shattered dreams. I mean, that's just part of being human. But do you let it dictate your reality? Do you identify with it so much so that it redefines you? Or do you find a way to be able to overcome it and learn from that experience so that you can emerge more resilient, more robust, more complete, and ready for the next challenge?
I agree. And I think that that's why you've done the work that you do and continue to do, because it's also providing tools, because how many people don't even know that there's a difference?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, a lot of people believe that what happens to you happens for a reason. And maybe you can't get over it. Maybe, in other words, friends of mine recently had their child die. And they say that that's the worst type of tragedy that anyone can ever experience. Now, this was a bizarre situation because the young woman, very beautiful woman, 21 years old, went to sleep and never woke up. Did not have any kind of ailment, disease, illness that anyone knew anything about. She just went to sleep one night and didn't wake up. She hadn't taken sleeping pills, nothing. They couldn't figure out after the autopsy what happened, except that in some strange way, it was her time to go. Well, the family was shattered, as you can imagine. And the steps to overcoming that were so traumatic because she was their treasure, the apple of their eye, and they did not want to even imagine that they could go on living without her. So it was step by step, the whole process of healing and overcoming this trauma.
At what point do you at all look at those underlying belief systems? So in this case, for me, I'm looking at how I've made sense of my life, the sort of the educational plan I've been on, if you will, is to uncover. I'll call myself a seeker, but only to seek out information that resonates with my deepest truth on an intuitive level and a whole body yes, and to say, okay, this is what I believe, whether there's science to back it up or not. And many times there are, but I'm not that person who needs the science to prove to myself. So in the case of, let's say, sacred contracts, right? I have a cousin who passed away when he was 29. Now, his situation was different, that he was taking some drugs and he was having some drinks, and he had done it a couple of times. But I kind of intuitively had this idea that this would happen in his life. And I felt very much like there was a contract there, like that there was a very specific reason on a higher level, not in our realm. And that doesn't necessarily change the pain and the grief. But for me, searching out a why, a bigger why than just I'm on this earth right now and that's all there is. For me, having a contract, I mean, my most recent divorce, why did I have to go through that? I've learned everything I've learned in order to prevent having a divorce, because I didn't think there was a problem I couldn't fix, except that I'm not in charge of someone else's decision making. So for me, having an idea or a belief system that says, I do believe that we reincarnate. I do believe that this is not our first or our last time on this planet. I do believe we make soul contracts that then we decide to come down and play a part so we can help each other learn lessons. I do believe all of that, which in that case, to me, softens the blow a little, or gives a little bit more hope that that person's still there for me to connect to on a spiritual level if I want to. So is there a point in which you ever address beliefs like that in that kind of situation?
Well, I'm not here to change people's beliefs unless they have the realization that those beliefs are not serving them. And if they come to that realization that their beliefs are not serving them, then I will help them reform, retool, reframe their beliefs in such a way that those new beliefs are really working for them. But I share with you the experience of, I've had 3 people come back and visit me after they have crossed over. And so I'm a big believer in the afterlife. And I've also had experiences of my past lives. So but I don't want to project that onto another person. And to me, that's given me a lot of peace to be able to know that this reality is the school that we're in, to be able to learn the lessons, to evolve, to be able to become, the next chapter. As a matter of fact, between you and me and our listeners, when I train coaches, secretly, it's my objective to train them to be earth angels.
I love that.
And what I mean by that is to be the guardian angel of a person that they have contracted with, to be able to support them in learning what life is here to teach them. Not just, fixing, getting through, muscling through the challenge, whatever it is, but really reflecting on the situation at a deep level and learning from everything that happens.
I love that. That's beautiful. And I believe it's true. And I think it's true even when we're not even aware it's true. Wouldn't you agree that everyone's here
Absolutely.
to teach us something and is in a way an angel of some kind, whether we have contrast with them or whether we love them or are irritated by them? Their presence evokes growth and expansion and clarity. And again, those lessons that will be repeated until learned, and the mirror that we need to maybe look at and say, what is this about for me?
Yeah, number 4 and number 7. And I think it's important to look at number 7, which is the mirror that you just brought up, which is to say, do I want this mirror in my life or do I want to not have this mirror? In other words, is this a mirror that really serves me, that I'm willing, ready, and able to learn from? Or is this just one that I'm going to resist and fight against continuously?
And for those of you who are talking about the 10 rules for being human, obviously you know them inside out and backwards to number them. I have the cheat sheet here next to me, but I don't have them in my memory quite yet numbered. So my favorite ones that were deal breakers for me, if you will, in the school of life that said, hello, wake up, this is a new thing for you, is that lessons will be repeated until learned, that others are only mirror of you, and there are no mistakes, only lessons. I think those 3 were the biggest ones.
Got it. Number 4, 7, and 3.
So this emotional safety step and barrier that a lot of people have, and taking on the task, if you will, to look at that and to work with that. What on the happiness operating system, what can someone expect to do with it? How would they process?
Okay. So I provide for them a workbook and a video, and I walk them through the challenge, each one of the 6 barriers. And I walk them through the steps to be able to determine, is this one of yours? Have you experienced this, and how have you overcome it? And if they have overcome it, great. And if they haven't, then I help them sort out, as you mentioned before, what is this here to teach you? What's the lesson you can learn? How can you let go, get over, release, heal, forgive, put it behind you? All the questions to be able to have the issue, whether it's the broken heart or it's the disillusionment or the betrayal or the shattered dreams. How can you allow this to be something that you consider now a gift rather than a burden and a sacrifice?
Great. And all the other tools, and it's a video series and a workbook. It's not in person. Okay, great. And is there a group that goes along with it? Am I attached to a community of people? Great.
Yes. There's a Facebook group that goes along with it, actually. And that's where they sign up and we come together and we talk about the different barriers and how to be able to resolve them and complete them and have them be the teachers that are giving them the puzzle pieces to their life.
When you were mentioning emotional safety and community, that's why I figured there had to be a place where you would invite them to commune and help each other and support each other on the journey of creating emotional safety and possibly networking and sharing experiences together as part of overcoming that barrier.
Definitely, because community is a really important piece of the puzzle. I mean, if you are surrounded with people who are constantly criticizing, judging, putting you down, and telling you that you can't, that you'll never make it, you'll never get there, that you don't have what it takes, it's like an uphill battle every day. Rather than having people around you who see your strengths, help you build on them, reinforce that. I mean, in my life, my first 13 years were kind of like a prison of being in school where I felt like I had to go. It wasn't joyful. It wasn't happy. I suffered through it. And it wasn't until I got to college that I actually had a professor ask me one day, what would you like to write this paper on? And I said, well, aren't you going to tell me? Aren't you going to give me the assignment? He said, actually, I want to know what you think. I said, nobody's ever been interested in what I thought before. And he said, well, I am. I want you to come up with something that really fascinates you, and I want you to do a compare and contrast of those two different types of theater that you can write on. And I want you to show me what you learn from this experience. It was a mind-blowing moment in my life. I'll never forget it because I thought, here's a male professor who's interested in what I think. First time ever.
Sounds like that was the moment you got your perspective for how to coach.
Well, it was part of it, definitely. It was a seed planting moment that illuminated this experience of how empowered I felt and how I grew under his tutorial, because it was a tutorial program. And I blossomed with this type of approach. And I noticed that it was kind of like note to self, blossoming happens when somebody asks you questions rather than telling you what to do. I think that's an important piece of the puzzle.
While I haven't coached with you personally, I've been coached through you by your books. My first life coach was very much that way also. And I'm not quite sure where her certification came from. I know she had one because I asked her about it years later in considering doing one. And I remember that was what felt different, was very much that she wanted me to pull the answers out of me and led me through very interesting and thought-provoking questions that allowed me to come up with the answer, which then made it more powerful, obviously, for my learning. And but it's very much in alignment with what you're talking about. So I have experienced that style firsthand, and I definitely think it's very powerful. So in your happiness operating system, we kind of covered emotional safety. Can we go over one more?
Sure. And the next one is about spiritual. It's about the spiritual connection, which we were just talking about. And it's kind of a nice intro to where the spiritual goes, because when we're talking about spirit, it can be your own spirit or it can be spirit, which is bigger than us. And it really doesn't matter ultimately if you believe, there's that word again, believe in your own inner knowing, your own spirit, or the spirit of a higher being, or if you believe in the spirit in other people. If you feel that disconnection from spirit, it can create an unhappiness or an ill at ease, so that you feel like if this is all there is, it's missing something.
My flagship show is called Spirit, Purpose, and Energy. It's my most popular show. So we're speaking the right language for my people who are listening, because many people do find me through the search of spirit, spirituality, law of attraction, things like that. So absolutely. And I think that's also another thing that isn't talked about openly as much as maybe it would be beneficial to focus on that, because if we're living in a situation where we're emotionally unsafe and then we don't have any connection to the essence of other people or something greater than ourselves, I mean, just those two things alone would create, I would think, a deep level of despair, possibly fear. And yeah, I mean, I just think that it feels very hopeless to have those two things working against me.
And, we live in a world right now where the shootings, whether it's school shootings or mall shootings or mosque shootings, whatever, they've become more commonplace and we've become desensitized. And I believe that those shootings are partly a result of the lack of spirit in our lives.
I would agree 100%. I would also want to add that I think it's also happening because we as a culture don't value human emotion and understanding emotion. Because
Agreed.
if we would actually look at the root of emotions and why we have them and how they work and how do we process them and how do we be with them and what do we do with them and how do we communicate with them, if we would actually study emotions just like anything else we study in school, in grade school, as we're growing up, teach your children how to be aware of their own feelings and how to process them, what to do about it in a healthy way. If we had that, all of this repressed anger and emotion that used to be creating wars is still creating wars. It just looks different. And people, like I agree, are desensitized to it to a degree, but we still continue to want to teach history as if remembering what happened in our past is going to prevent it from our future, when the actual act of something is not the lesson. The lesson is what's underneath that. What was that about? What were they feeling? What were they wanting? What were they perceiving? And until we have that conversation a little bit more often in different levels, I fear that things won't change as much as, I believe and trust that they will, because I'm part of that. I'm part of your tribe and the light workers wanting to shed that light, wanting to get in there and help people do that and identify with that so we can really go to the most simplest, basic part of our human beingness, which is our experience and our feelings, and understanding that on a whole new level so we can stop looking at the outside of the acts and go and dial it back a little bit to say, hey, what's going on here? Because there's a lot of repressed anger and rage that we have as a society that we're not dealing with. So of course, these things aren't shocking, but they're happening because we're not dealing with them.
You're absolutely right. Because of the suppression of feelings, we end up with people looking for short-term gratification to be able to cope with the suppression of feelings. So for instance, alcoholism and alcohol deaths are at a 35-year high. People numbing out. 24 million Americans consume an average of 10 drinks per day of alcohol. The addictions of sugar, alcohol, bread, sex, shopping, prescription drugs, pornography, binge watching, anything, gaming, coffee, chocolate. The addictions are rampant. And those addictions are not just random. They're happening because people feel that they can't cope. They can't cope because they're suppressing their feelings. There's no healthy way of expressing them in their life. And what they do instead is they either get involved in a substance or a process or an activity that allows them to have short-term gratification as opposed to dealing with long-term satisfaction.
Well, we fortunately are here to help that. Yes.
You bet.
And I agree 100%. We talk about addiction on my show a lot and all the things you just named. The one I'd add in there also would be workaholism.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Because people think, but I'm working, but I'm making money, but I'm helping people, but it's out of balance to being. And we're human beings, not human doings. So in order to be able to express and feel and be present to what's going on for you, what's real for you, you have to stop the momentum of that, like you said, numbing out or putting our attention outside of ourselves so often. So I love that the happiness operating system, already those two pieces, the emotional safety piece and the spiritual connection, sometimes I believe that's just what people are looking for. They just don't know how to articulate it. I mean, those two things probably just alone would shift someone's life entirely.
Yeah, for sure. And, the thing is, my brother-in-law died in the last couple of years, and he had so many addictions that he wouldn't even discuss them. He just hid them and acted out. And as a result, one day they found him and he had just died because of his overdoses of everything. Now, people die. That happens. We're all going to die. The question is, are we living our best lives? Are we living a life that's happy, that's joyful from the inside out? Or are we just coping and getting through the day with a kind of spiritual deprivation?
I'm glad you brought that up. There are several therapists that I've worked with over the years, professionally, personally, and what I recognize, some of the things that I didn't like about some of the therapeutic ideas were more about coping than they were about healing. And maybe that's what's taught. I'm not a trained therapist, but maybe that's what's taught to get someone from point A to point D is through, first we start with this and then we move to this. And maybe that's what's supposed to happen. But to me, I would just see people year after year continue just to cope and just to find a trick or to not be triggered, to avoid that person. And I thought, that's not healing. That's not healing. That's just avoiding. So we're not actually getting under there and cleaning out anything. And boy, wouldn't it be nice to me? What I tell people is that to me, healing is when you're different in the same situation. And then I don't have to worry about running away from someone else or changing my behavior or avoiding this. I mean, that's a lot of stress. And so that whole coping conversation of cutting people out of your life, and it's fine. I'm not suggesting everyone has to stay in everyone's lives, but the idea that here are these 5 things that I should never do again or avoid because I don't want to feel the pain, but the wound is still there. And coping, maybe at first I'm sure there are plenty of situations where, again, that you have to go through a series of layering of, stages of grief where the first thing is to cope, but then hopefully there's something a little bit deeper under there to help us just transform. And I know that you're on that because this is, to me, that's what If Life is a Game is all about. And everything that I think you represent in what we've been discussing and all I've learned from you over the years is that it's not lessons will be repeated until learned. So let's just learn them. Otherwise you're just walking around, like you said, coping and numbing out. And I don't think that's a recipe for success.
You're right. And one of the things that I apply to all the different barriers is the R's. First is release, and that deals with the feelings, releasing those feelings. And then after the feelings are released comes the repair work. That's oftentimes forgiveness and also looking closely at what are the lessons, what are they here to teach me? Then the repair work, making whole again, as you say, the healing part of the process, reconciling what this happened and the big why, as you mentioned, reconciling why this happened, and then the reconnection with self, reconnection with spirit, reconnection with life.
Well, I wrote those down: release, repair, reconcile, and reconnection. That's brilliant. But that's why you're doing what you're doing. Because of course that's you. Yes, you're welcome. So when can someone purchase the Happiness Operating System? Is it something that's available right now? Is it launching, I think you said January 2020, around the 15th?
That's correct. January 15th, 2020.
All right. So I am very passionate about wanting to share the Happiness Operating System. I believe you and I have touched on 2 of the 6 barriers to happiness that even just in that, I believe is life-changing. I mean, one of them is life-changing. Let's be real. It depends on whatever the block is for someone, there is definitely value. Even if you feel like you have emotional safety, I'm sure everyone can find a deeper sense of emotional safety and have a better awareness, a more fine-tuned awareness to what that means for them and how to go to the next level with it. At the top of the show, you and I were talking about growth and evolution. And I was talking about that whole business plan, and I don't know what I'm selling because I'm selling so many things and I continue to grow, and you've grown and expanded and developed over your 45 years of coaching. And so to me, the whole idea of lessons are repeated until learned also feels like, well, when the lesson is learned, and what's the next one about lessons that, number 5, learning does not end. See, I feel like those 2 things are very separate in that when I learn a lesson, that doesn't mean I'm going to coast. It just means I'm expanding to the next level.
Exactly.
I'm going to be stepping into a very huge role that I haven't been ready to step into until some of my lessons had to be learned to clear the path for this next step. Would you agree with that?
Exactly. That's the thing. It's you're growing into bigger shoes all the time. And your feet may look small, but the shoes look large. And in order to fit into those shoes, you have to take a leap of faith in your belief in who you are. So it can't be, who do you think you are? You have to know who you are and then believe that who you are has been given these challenges, not randomly. It's not a mistake. It's part of the perfection of the process. One little tiny story. When I was married to a previous spouse, husband, who is no longer with us on this plane. I remember I came home one day and I found that he had left me a note and he was gone. He had left me. And I turned to my dear friend Judy, who was a therapist, and she said to me, you're really lucky he left. And I said, why? And she said, because you never would have. You would have stayed here forever thinking that love conquers all. And it was never going to work. And I said, really? She said, Cherie, you tried everything you could, but you were married to somebody who was a sociopath. I took a deep breath and I said, seriously? And she said, it just was doomed from the beginning. No matter how much you loved him, no matter what you cooked for him, no matter how kind you were, there was always something he would find that was not quite right, that he would dwell on and pick on. She said, you're lucky he left. Give thanks and then learn the lessons about why he was in your life, what he was here to teach you, what you're grateful for, and then let go.
What did you learn from that? I'm curious about what the answer is.
There were a lot of things that I learned from him. Part of it was how to be able to live well, how to travel well, and how to be able to hold yourself in high enough esteem to allow yourself to live the law of attraction.
I love that. I love that. Yes. Okay. Okay. Now, for anyone who's listening, and you're definitely getting the happiness operating system, but maybe you're someone who wants to coach and you are attracted, I don't know why you wouldn't be, to Dr. Cherie's MMS Institute, let's send them there too. Can we talk a little bit about if they're feeling the calling of coaching and they want to be certified through you?
Yes, absolutely. We have two different types of coach trainings available, 60-hour and 125-hour. The 60-hour is the one that trains you for the first level of coaching, which is an associate certified coach. And in those 60 hours, we bundle everything. So we include the mentoring of 10 hours and the demonstration of coaching and then individual feedback and teaching the ICF core competencies. And we do that program in San Francisco and in Connecticut and in Vietnam and Dubai. And then the other program, which is the 125 hours, which is the accredited coach training program through the ICF, is that we offer that program in Thailand and in Holland. And that happens twice a year in each place. So we offer those different programs. Now, often people will fly in for the 3 lab weekends, one at the beginning, one in the middle, and one towards the end. And they'll be remote for the other sessions, the classroom sessions, if they don't want to relocate to one of those areas of the world. And those trainings, I've been told by people who are not invested in me liking them, but like, for instance, the head of Medical Coaching International, Shiri Ben-Arzi, she said to me, if only I could have in my medical coach training, which is an advanced program, if only I could have all MMS trained coaches. She said, it would be so much easier because you are so dedicated to each person becoming rooted in their own confidence, courage, compassion, and being willing to take the risks that it takes to be able to truly serve their clients.
Well, that's an amazing compliment.
Yeah.
And I don't doubt it for 1 second. So where do they go? What's the website?
TheMMSinstitute.com.
So if you're interested in learning more about how to become a certified trainer through Dr. Cherie at the MMS Institute, go to theMMSinstitute.com to learn more about the programs and the next one that you may be able to attend. So Dr. Cherie, it's been awesome to have you back on the show again. And anytime you have something new coming out, you're always welcome to come back here. You're, again, one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. You woke me up, and so now it's your fault. No, I'm kidding. That I've had a fire under my butt to help people live the best life that they can live as well. And I'm honored that you took your time to come on my show. And I know that many people will be getting involved in the happiness operating system, as well as checking out becoming a coach with the MMS Institute. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, JJ. It's my pleasure to talk with you and to meet the wonderful tribe that you've created.